Extended, presented by Lacrosse Flash.
Welcome back to the show, Tuesday, March 23rd, the first episode of Goal Line Extended. We appreciate you watching and or listening from wherever you are. We're going to be talking the PLL entry draft in a moment. Pat Gregoire is joining us, Lacrosse insider and analyst here at Lacrosse Flash. Pat, before we get started, I want to give a quick shout out to Austin Owens, editor-in-chief and social media coordinator here at Flash. He'll be joining us on future shows. Actually, on Thursday, he'll be joining us ahead of the entry draft. But pretty much, I brought this idea to Austin, and he created this entire show idea that I had from the ground up. And what you're watching today is really a product of that man making my ideas come to life. So appreciate you, Austin. Looking forward to working with you, getting you here on the show. But let's get after this thing, Pat. First question I have for you is, first, how are you feeling today? Second question, is there any chance that the currently unsigned Lyle Thompson does not get drafted by the Cannons first overall on Thursday night?
Well, I want to first off say thank you for having me on the show, and shout out to Austin as well. I know you guys have been working really, really hard for this, and I think, we're already off to a running start, and I can't wait to go. And now addressing that Lyle Thompson question, there's just absolutely zero chance that Lyle Thompson doesn't go number one overall. He's a generational talent, once in a lifetime type of player in the game of lacrosse. He brings just so much to a team when you have him on your roster, on and off the field. So I think it's a no-brainer that he's going to end up with the Cannons. And I mean, you can speculate all you want for that number one pick, but Lyle will be wearing a Cannons jersey this year.
We've known from his days at Albany that Lyle is truly a special player. As of right now, he holds the NCAA points record, obviously in question, or as of right now, possibly we see Michael Sowers getting close to that record. He's dominated the pro game since leaving Albany. Pat, what makes him so special and then so valuable to an expansion team like the Cannons, and how do you see him fitting in on this offense?
I mean, it's so much that makes Lyle so special. And I think that's the thing. It's the abundance of things that he does well. He's not just an elite scorer. He's not, just an elite playmaker or a great two-way player. He's a guy that can literally do everything and anything that you ask him. I'm pretty sure if you told him he's got to strap on the pads and play net, he would do it and do a pretty good job at it while he's at it. But he's a guy that can score at will. He's a great facilitator. He has unbelievable vision, some of the best lacrosse IQ in the game, but his creativity is really what makes him special as well. We see him score goals and set up plays that we've never seen from other players. He's a dominant athlete, and when the ball is on the ground, he's going to be the first guy to that ball as well and pick it up. So he just does so much things on the floor, and we didn't even talk about him away from the field. He's so passionate about the game of lacrosse. I don't know if there's someone who loves the game nearly as much and it means so much to him as well. It's clearly more than just a game for Lyle. And what's he going to do to an expansion team? Well, he's going to do just so much for him. I think he's the type of guy that if he needs to play attack, which it sounds like that's probably where he's going to slide in, he can do that. But he could also run some offensive midfield as well. He's so versatile. He can do so much for a team. And I think he's just going to fit in perfectly and be a great leader for a Cannons team that's going to struggle to have some chemistry early on because they are an expansion team, but he's the type of guy that just makes everyone around him better. And I think he's going to be that cohesive glue that's going to bring this team together early on.
You talk about the struggles expansion teams kind of face. We saw that this past championship series with the Water Dogs, kind of just really the struggle to just gel right away. And then obviously once you get to the second half, you're down a handful of goals. It's tough to come back. We saw them make a comeback against Chrome, just obviously too little too late. You talk about the veteran leadership. They're also bringing in a guy, obviously Paul Rabel, who they got out of the trade with Atlas, drafted Brody Merrill first overall in the expansion draft. Now bringing on a big third leader in Lyle Thompson, really at each stage of the field. That's got to be good if you're a Cannons fan.
Absolutely. And I think that's such a big, valuable part, especially with this season. It's not going to be a bubble season, but still, we don't really know what to expect. There might be some guys that might not be able to travel crossing the border from Canada, whatever it may be. But the more veterans that you have that have been professionals and understand what it takes to win, I think that's only going to be more valuable. And you mentioned Brody Merrill. I think that's a huge pickup. And obviously there's some question marks whether how many games he's going to be able to make it just due to the current global pandemic with the border. But I think even if he shows up to half the games, not only is he going to bring you value on the field, but he's going to give you that value for being that leader. And he's going to teach some of those youngsters that probably they're going to draft. You got to assume that obviously with the collegiate draft, but they're going to try to go for a more younger of a core. It looks like that's what they did. Sean Quirk addressed also in the other draft that we saw last week. So I think they're going to try to be young, but as you mentioned, they're trying to fill in some of those holes as well with some of the older veterans that are going to be able to teach these guys the way.
Absolutely. Reese Eddy, a guy that will be joining me in a little bit, one of those youngsters that Coach Quirk drafted. The Cannons, they picked first overall. The Archers picked second overall. We'll be talking more about the Archers on Thursday. But with all due respect to the Cannons, the expansion team joining the PLL this season, the Atlas have been the team to watch this offseason. Attackman Rob Pennell and Ryan Brown, as well as midfielder Paul Rabel, as we mentioned before, traded away by head coach Ben Rubier for draft picks ahead of the entry draft and college draft. Rubier now has 10 combined picks and will hope to retool this Atlas team. Retool being a word that Austin coined that we've been using quite often lately to describe this Atlas offseason. It all starts here in the entry draft at pick number 3. Rubier received that pick in that Rob Pennell trade. What should be the priority here at third overall?
I think at this point, I don't know if you address position of need, because maybe you go for a defender, and if a guy like Ben Randall is on the board, possibly you go for him. But I think you just take the best available player at that point. And I think at number 3, potentially you could have a guy like Dan Baccaro, and he's going to fit in perfectly with that young approach as well, that you're talking about retooling. You're not rebuilding, but you're retooling. But when you are retooling, you want some young elite talent. And that's exactly what Dan Baccaro is. What we saw from him in the MLL bubble season last year, it was remarkable. This guy is an absolute electric factory on the field. He's fast. He's got a deceptive shot. He can play. He can make unbelievable plays passing the ball. I think he's one of the most elite dodgers that I've seen in the game in a long, long time. And I think that he will fit in perfectly with the Atlas. And I mean, it might bump up a guy like Chris Cloutier out of the starting attack position. But what we've seen from Cloutier, not just in professional lacrosse, but pretty much throughout his entire career, he's a guy that has no problem coming off the bench, being a power play specialist, being a guy that just fits into a role wherever you fit. We've seen him even do that in the box game as well, too. So I think if you pick up a guy like Baccaro, he's going to only strengthen up the rest of that attack core that they do have in place right now.
We've seen a lot really over the last 2 years, and then looking at it for year 3, attackmen playing midfielders running in on attack. I mean, you were just saying before the possibility even Lyle Thompson could run out of the box. We definitely could see that this coming season into the future. But I like that point about Baccaro. Let's talk about the Water Dogs. Andy Copeland's team, one of the hardest hit teams by the expansion draft. They lost 3 players, including Brody Merrill that we talked about before. What should Copeland be looking for here, selecting 4th overall?
I think that this player is going to be here at this point, and I think it's a no-brainer for me. Obviously, being a little bit biased here, being Canadian, being with my box lacrosse roots, but I think if Challen Rogers is on the board at number 4, the Water Dogs have no choice but to take this guy. He is a unbelievable athlete that can play both sides of the ball. If you want him to play D mid and push the ball up the floor, he can do that. If you want him to run some offensive mid, well, he's an unbelievable dodger that has great ability to feed. And then now all of a sudden you have Zach Courier and Challen Rogers playing at the same time. Those 2 guys could probably not even get off the field and run midfield all game long. They're going to just absolutely dominate the ground game with loose balls. They're unbelievable hard workers, but they also can contribute in offense as well in transition or even in settled situations. So you put a guy like Challen Rogers, who's just a freak athlete that's going to be able to help you out at pretty much any aspect of the game. I think it's a no-brainer. And I think he's going to be available there as well, just based on the top three teams that we've already discussed. They have so many needs that they need to address. I think Challen Rogers does fall to 4, and I think it's just going to create an unbelievable dynamic at midfield for a team, like you mentioned, that has lost already so much after just already being an expansion team, finally building something, and then it just kind of gets taken right out from under you. So I think this is a great piece that they can really build on here.
Quirk mentioned too, if he had the opportunities to select more than 3 players, he would have taken 5 if he had the opportunity from the Water Dogs. So definitely tough for Coach Copeland, coming off of year one, what was not the greatest year one. If you were to ask him, I bet that he would say that as well. But definitely going into year 3, into this entry draft at pick number 4, Challen Rogers would be a great addition to run side by side with Zach Currier.
And I think the thing too is, yes, it wasn't wasn't their best way to jump into the league, and a disappointing season, no less. But this is a team that was pretty much in every single game. They just fell short. You mentioned obviously a couple of slow starts that really cost them. So they were very close. And I think now that you kind of have that chemistry built, you think you're moving in the right direction, and then you just get absolutely obliterated by this expansion draft. So now they're going to have a chip on their shoulder again. And I think bringing in a guy like Challen Rogers at that number 4 pick, he's a guy that has won at many levels. He knows what it takes to be a champion. He's young, so he's a guy that's going to be there for a long time. And I think he just fits in perfectly with the run and gun style that we saw the Water Dogs like to play in that championship series. So I know I've said it a million times, and I'll say it until I'm blue in the face. I think that every single person, every coach, every player, any executive, if they had a choice to put a guy like Challen Rogers on their roster, they're going to take that opportunity.
You're talking all the championships. Zach Currier, another guy that has won a ton of professional championships. So you have all that championship experience on one team, especially still a young team, even though all 8 of these teams are still young teams, but a young team, fairly inexperienced team that you bring 2 known winners to. Hopefully we'll see better results here in year 2 for the Water Dogs. Pat, there are over 200 players available in this draft. However, only 24 will be taken over the 3 rounds. My guess is that Friday, Saturday, and really I'm thinking from now until the close of the waiver wire and trade window on May 15, we're going to see a lot of player movement, whether it be teams signing guys off the player pool, teams trading players away ahead of the college draft, and then ahead of that May 15 deadline, Pat, are there any sleepers that we should be keeping an eye out for, especially during Thursday night's entry draft?
Yeah, you mentioned it. I mean, there's just so many players that are available and there's only 24 spots to be taken. So if one of your favorite players don't get selected on Thursday night, don't worry. There's a good chance that they're probably going to get signed. And this guy here, I don't know if he's going to get drafted, but I would be shocked if he doesn't find his way onto a roster. And I'm talking about Latrell Harris. This guy is an absolute freak. Not the biggest name when you talk to folks down south, with the NCAA, never played NCAA lacrosse. He was a guy that really just burst onto the scene in the National Lacrosse League, getting drafted as an 18-year-old who goes to the University of Brock, which is one of the better programs in Canada here. But he also played for Team Canada. He has the ability to be a short stick defensive midfielder, or you can play some LSM or even close defense. He played on Team Canada. And I think this guy, just the ceiling is so high for him. Just 20 years old, as well as you can really do a little more dive in on the lacrosseflash.com right now with Austin's piece. I know he's a big fan of Latrell Harris and his game, but there's so many other players too. And I'm going to just stick to the Canadian theme, obviously, with my expertise, but you could say Ryan Lee, Mark Matthews, Shane Jackson, but I think those guys are pretty well-known commodities across the game. But for a guy that I would like to really keep my eyes on, is Trevor Smith. I have a lot of opportunity seeing him playing in the indoor game with the Halifax Thunderbirds, but this is a guy that has a ton of experience in field lacrosse as well. Played Division III with the Rochester Institute of Technology, RITO wagon in D3 lacrosse. And Smith is a guy that has some professional experience, a little bit in the MLL, playing with the Florida Launch. So he's a freak athlete. He's a guy that can really move the ball up the floor, up the field, I should say. He's a monster on ground balls. He's a guy that probably isn't going to go on Thursday, but again, like Latrell Harris, I think he's a guy that finds his way onto a roster and could be a very, very solid piece for any of these PLL teams.
Really, in general, guys that can play with a short stick as well as a long pole, and for a guy like Harris, that reading Austin's article, make sure you check that out at lacrosseflash.com. He can pick up a pole, play down low. He can play LSM. He can play short stick. He can play on a wing if you want to throw him on a wing. Guys like that are valuable. We saw last year, Ryland Reese, a guy that was taken in last year's entry draft, a guy that can really do it all, more becoming an LSM mainly for the Water Dogs. But Latrell Harris, definitely a name to keep an eye out for on Thursday night's entry draft. And as we're saying, in the days and weeks following the entry draft. Definitely some high-profile names to keep an eye out for, though, as really Thursday night's draft unfolds. Again, we will have a show out ahead of the draft on Thursday, so make sure to keep an eye out for that. Follow the show on Instagram and Twitter at GL Extended so you don't miss anything. Pat, thank you so much. We will be back with more PLL entry draft coverage on Thursday, and we're going to get to a quick break. On the other side, Cannon's LSM, Reese Eddy. Don't go anywhere. We will be right back.